Hey, you guys, welcome back. I am very, very excited to have Robert Walsh joining me today. I met Robert back in Round Rock a couple of years ago, was fascinated to learn about what he does. I have so enjoyed every conversation I've had with him, and I cannot wait for you to meet him today. So you are in for a real treat. And Robert, welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Oh, thanks, Leslie. I'm excited to be here as well.
I am, I always, like I noted before, I always learn so much when I talk to you. And David and I were just talking not long ago about how different the world is now, the resources and the things that you teach are so critically important for the kids coming up, and actually for us as adults too, but especially as we're equipping our kids. I'm excited to dive into that, what is STEM, why it matters, all of those things here in just a minute. But for those who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and what you're doing now to kind of set the stage for our bigger conversation?
Sure. So, as a kid, I loved computers. I had a very early computer, when I was in middle school, and then just sort of evolved going through high school and into college. I was a computer science major for a couple of years in college before I got into education. And I actually have a bachelor's degree in secondary math education. I taught public school for about 3 years before I decided I wanted to go back and do work with computers. And so for around 25 years, I've been a computer programmer. But as my children were getting older and sort of making the transition from high school to college, I realized that neither of them really had much of an interest in technology, which I found sort of surprising since that's all I've ever done. And it struck me that they simply hadn't had the kinds of opportunities to explore computer programming or electronics or robotics or rocketry or any of those things. So they didn't develop an interest. And so I didn't want that to happen to other kids. I think every kid should have access to, quality, robust STEM education, if for nothing else, to decide whether they like it or they don't. And so I started with this idea of creating something I call the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy, where we try to educate kids and give them access to projects that teach computer programming, electronics, 3D modeling, and other aspects of technology and engineering. So we sort of focus on the T and the E specifically in STEM education. When I decided to do that, I went back to school. I got a master's in STEM education. So I hold 2 education degrees, but I've got a vast amount of experience in a career as a computer programmer. And I sort of try to blend all that together, as I'm teaching, so that not only are you learning just the fundamentals of computer science, but you're also learning from my experience and the things that really work and the things that don't, and the good practices and all of that. So
that is awesome. And as you were talking, I was thinking, we talk so much about how this is a digital generation. The kids pick up things so much quicker. And I wonder if the access that they have and how they've grown up native to digital stuff has actually served the purpose of kind of holding them back in getting a skill set with it. So they're all self-taught. They know how to navigate a phone and stuff, but they don't really understand or even have a curiosity the same way that we did when it was all new, that really kind of drives the deep learning.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And like you said, they've grown up with cell phones from very young ages. And obviously that varies from family to family at what point, you get your first digital device. But they've become digital consumers. They know how it works to the point that they can use it to do what they want to do with it. They're masters of social media. They are wizards when it comes to texting and communicating in this digital world. But they don't understand how it works under the covers. And so as a society, we are growing a vast number of technology consumers, but we're diminishing the number of technology producers. And so as this generation gets older and our generation starts to sort of dwindle out of the workspace, my fear is that we're going to lose the know-how. We're not going to know how to make those new innovative products anymore because it's just ubiquitous. It's there and we know how to use it, but we don't know how it works. And I see this in my own house. My wife will call down and say, hey, the printer's not working. Well, diagnosing printer problems is something that everybody today kind of has to know how to do. And as we just become, we take for granted that the printer's there and it's going to work.
Right.
And so when it doesn't work, some of us aren't developing the skills that we need to fix those kinds of issues. Same thing with the internet. The internet's out. Well, what do you do? So there's a lot of examples like that.
That is so fascinating because honestly, until, that very moment, I had never considered the fact that these kids are swimming in all this technology, but they don't really know their knowledge is what, a mile wide and an inch deep. They don't really know how it works or why it works or what it can do. They just know how to use it consumer wise, like you noted. So this is okay. So I've had my revelation so far today. But let's start at the very, very beginning. For those who may not fully know what it is, we hear this word STEM all the time, but a lot of us don't really know what it actually entails. Can you explain what is STEM? And then we'll kind of dive into why we need to make sure our kids fully understand these things.
Sure. And you make a great point. We hear it all the time. It's a buzzword. It's just become something that people throw around. Educators, schools, technology companies, they throw around this term STEM. But beyond a general understanding that it's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, there is no real commonly accepted definition for what is STEM beyond that. And so a lot of people or companies will say that, well, if I have a science product, then that's STEM because it's teaching science, and science is one of the components of STEM education. But what's lost with just the acronym is the concept of integration. And to me, that's a big part of what STEM education is. It's the integration between those separate disciplines. And I think that true STEM should combine at least two of those subjects through interdisciplinary instruction and project-based learning. And what those two things give you is what's called an authentic context or a real world context that the students can begin to apply the skills and the concepts that they're learning to things that they see in everyday life. Now, in the real world, if you think about it, we don't just use math or science to solve a problem. Almost never do we see the exact word problem from the math textbook. And that's exactly what you have to do. This is clearly an addition and a multiplication problem. We never do that. We always combine subjects together. We use the collection of all the knowledge and the skills that we have. So the traditional classroom puts up arbitrary barriers between subjects that simply don't exist outside of school. And so to me, STEM education helps to dissolve those boundaries and give kids the experience and the knowledge that they need to solve problems like they're going to find in the real world.
That is such a good point. And as homeschoolers, we tend to look more holistically at things anyway. And yet because we're so trained by what we think of brick and mortar school, what we think, what education in air quotes actually is, that we fall into the same trap that the school system does. Whereas we think so holistically about so many other things, but yeah, I think that we silo a lot of the STEM stuff and feel like we're checking boxes when we're not really making the connections that we need to make to help them truly understand how it all works together.
Exactly. And that word connections that you used is a key. I mean, that's really what it all boils down to. Being able to see a problem and know, I'm going to need to use some math here, but I'm also going to need to use something else along with that. I might have to write a computer program, and my computer program might need to apply some math that I learned in geometry or algebra or even trigonometry.
Wow. Well, I'm telling you, every time I talk to you, you challenge the way I think. I learn something new. I have these, big realizations or recognitions. So I'm always grateful to have you on. So we've looked at what STEM is and how it all fits together. And you kind of alluded back at the beginning as to why it's so important, but I want you to expand on that a little bit for us. Why is it so critical that we give our kids a really good foundation in STEM, how they all work together, the connections, all of that, so that we are preparing them to walk through whatever door God opens for them in the days ahead? Because my expectation is most doors that are going to be available will, in the days ahead, it's going to really draw on a lot of these things.
Sure. And there's been a lot of studies in the past decade that tell about how many STEM jobs there are and how fast STEM careers are growing relative to non-STEM careers and so on. And that trend is expected to continue. There's going to be more jobs that require technology than there are jobs that don't require technology going forward. There's also evidence that says that people who work in STEM fields make much more than people who work in non-STEM fields. So it gives you financial independence if you have a better paying job than you might get if you don't have the skills. So, but to me, it's even more fundamental than that. So when students engage in this interdisciplinary instruction and project-based learning, they begin to move from thinking in isolation, like we've talked about, to thinking through application. So instead of saying, oh, I'm doing my homework, they say, I'm designing something. I'm designing a solution to a problem, there's a concept in education called Bloom's taxonomy, and it's a hierarchy of what are of the cognitive skills that are required to perform certain kinds of tasks. And it's, if you look up Bloom's taxonomy, you'll find lots and lots of educational research associated with it. But at the bottom of the scale in Bloom's taxonomy are what are called low order thinking skills. And so if you think back to school, you took multiple choice tests, you took fill in the blank tests. Those didn't challenge you as a thinker. They really didn't even measure what you knew beyond, yes, I can recall the definition, or I can give you a simple explanation based on what I read in the textbook about photosynthesis or whatever. So those are the low order thinking skills. When you work with STEM projects, you tend to move much higher up the scale, and you start doing things like applying and analyzing, evaluating, and synthesizing or creating new things. So you're taking all of that rote knowledge, the stuff that you've memorized, the stuff that you've learned, and you're seeing how you can use it to do something meaningful. So you really go from just knowing something to being able to do something. And so to me, that is really the biggest foundational benefit of STEM education. It teaches you to think. It teaches you to use what you know in new contexts so that you can do new and meaningful and interesting things with that knowledge.
Wow.
Obviously, though, you definitely have a leg up on, other people who don't have these skills when you go to college, when you go to get a job. People who have STEM skills are very much in demand, even if they don't work in a STEM field. And that's because they know how to think. They know how to problem solve. They know how to adapt to changing environments and changing situations, because those are all things that you have to do when you write a computer program or build an electrical circuit, So there's just so many benefits, and I could talk for a very, very long time about why I think STEM is so important.
No, and I think that you've made an incredible case for it. And again, given us things to think about that we gloss over. In fact, as you were talking, I was thinking so many of us, I'll speak specifically to homeschool moms because that's a lot of who is listening here, we struggle with technology. I hear that all the time, especially, with navigating just general things. We always kind of use almost as a crutch. We struggle with technology, or I just don't get it, or whatever. How much do you see that mental block, that fear really of the technological and, all of these things that are so unknown to us? How much do you find that holds people back from passing on those skills and actually opportunities to their kids?
Yeah, I think that's a big obstacle to a lot of people, because we tend to shy away from the things we don't understand. Right. And when we're responsible for educating our children, we feel like we have to be the expert in all of these different areas in order to pass on what we know. And if we don't know it, we can't pass it on. But, if you think about it, particularly when you get in homeschool, when you get beyond sort of middle school, middle school math is everyday math. That's what we do to balance our checkbook and everything else. But when you get into, applied geometry and trigonometry and calculus, those are specialized areas. And so the everyday average homeschool parent is not going to be equipped to teach calculus to their child. They're going to have to go find extra external curricular resources to teach those specialized subjects. Physics is another one that not everybody has a solid understanding of physics. So computer programming and electrical engineering and 3D design and those kinds of skills are also things that fall into that category. Not everybody knows how to do those things. Not everybody uses those things. And so I think we have to get comfortable as parents of saying, I don't know that, but
Yeah.
my kids need to know it. And so I'm going to go out and find resources that I can use and bring into my homeschool to give my kids those opportunities, even if it's not something that I'm comfortable with or that I understand very well.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the, I guess, fringe benefits of homeschooling is then we get to learn along with them. So
Yeah.
I have learned so much about so many things that I never knew. I didn't get them when I was younger. Either it wasn't offered or I just didn't care. But as my kids, especially through those upper level high school where I'm being stretched or I'm outsourcing some things that they're outside of my wheelhouse. I have learned so much just by watching them learn and grow, the projects that they're doing, as they're explaining what they're learning. That has been such an enriching thing for me. And when we shy away from those things that we don't understand, we are really missing out on even the personal growth that we get by kind of walking along with our kids through those.
And as a side benefit of that, your kids get to see how excited you are about
Yes.
learning something new and becoming what we call a lifelong learner, someone who
Mhm.
appreciates the acquisition of knowledge from very young through very old, and that
Right.
you never lose that interest in wanting to know something new. And that's a really good model for your kids to see, for them to see that it's okay not to know something, and that you don't have any reason, you're not getting graded on this, you're not working
Right.
for your diploma. And so it's great for them to see that you're still interested in doing that, even though there is no necessarily tangible benefit to you.
Well,
It's just fun, it's
exactly.
interesting and exciting.
Well, and our kids get the opportunity to teach us, which is the highest level of learning when you can turn around and actually teach it to
Absolutely.
someone else. And so we're able to, through these natural conversations that happen just because you're intrigued by what you're studying, you get to really stretch your kids and make sure that they're understanding what they're getting, even as you're growing. I mean, it's like the ultimate win win educationally here.
And going back to what you said earlier about the kids being sort of digital natives, so they have a perspective on the world that we probably will never have just
Yes.
because of the way they've grown up. And so, you go through the grocery store and you're using some self checkout station at the grocery store to check out as you're finishing your purchases. We as adults are going to look at that and say, "Gosh, I wonder how that works," and that may be the end of it for us. But then that might inspire your kids, and the gears start turning and they start churning through this, and they come up with stuff based on what they know technology can do and the way technology
Mm.
works for them that we wouldn't necessarily think of. And so now you can start feeding that off of one another back and forth. They give you an idea and then you push back on their idea. Well, how would it do this? And
Mm.
then you come up with this sort of a mental model of how that system might work. And even better, how could it be improved?
Yeah.
Where are the shortcomings? There's a lot of shortcomings in products that we use every day. And it would be great if somebody would look at them and see, oh, this could be improved if we just did this.
Well, and that's just really leaning into that curiosity that we want to spark in our kids and that love of learning and seeking deeper understanding of things. This is a perfect example of that, and we're surrounded by it. And I have even been amazed. So my older three kids were like 3.5 years from 1 to 3. And then there's this 3 year gap, 3.5 year gap actually before number 4. My youngest, who is a junior in high school now, her reality was actually incredibly different than high school for my older three. And it's astonishing how quickly things are changing. And so just being able to have these conversations and stay current has been enlightening for me because I would miss all of this stuff. She's living in it. I would miss it. So again, there's just a whole lot of benefits to engaging in these wonder-filled conversations with our kids as we're troubleshooting and getting creative.
Right. And you mentioned sort of pace of change, and if you sort of look at the technical world in a microcosm, how often does Google update? Google
Yeah.
Chrome, you open it up and it's like there's a new version every day almost, there's a new version of Google Chrome. And sometimes that new version looks and acts just like the previous version. But every once in a while, they put something in a different place, or they change the name of a menu or something like that. And those of us who are comfortable with technology can just sort of roll with that.
Right, right.
Those of us who have simply memorized that, oh, I always have to go here and find this, and then it's here and I find this, they're the ones who struggle. And so I just think the more exposure that you can have to those kinds of opportunities and those kinds of applications, the more equipped you're going to be just to deal with life, because life is going to be ever changing and ever evolving. And so the better you're equipped to sort of deal with that and compensate, the better off you're going to be.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. Now I can hear, though, in my mind's eye, a lot of parents out there who are saying that, yeah, but my child isn't interested in STEM. That's not their bent. That's not who they are. Why, even for those kids who legitimately really aren't interested, because not everybody is, obviously, but why is it so important to make sure that they have at least a foundational understanding of these things?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd push back just a little bit and say, how are you sure that your child isn't ultimately going to be interested in a STEM career? The statistics vary, but somewhere between 30 and 80% of college students change their majors at least one time. So a lot of kids think they know what they want to go do. They get into college and they have a very different idea of what they want to go do. And if you have given up on the opportunity to have at least some foundational skills and knowledge, then it may be too late when you get to the point where you say, gosh, I really wish I knew more about that so I could go into that area, but I'm not qualified now. So I would say that give them the opportunity to have that firsthand exposure, because then at least they're making an informed decision about whether they like it or they don't like it. It's kind of like, how do you know you like to play football until you've had the chance to play football? It looks like fun when you watch it on TV, but it really hurts when you get hit. And so, having the chance to do it gives you more information about whether you like to do it. So anyway, beyond that, whether we like it or not, as we've been talking about, the world is full of technology. And there was a study that was done recently by the National Skills Coalition that found that 92% of today's jobs require some degree of technical literacy. And so if your child can't navigate the keyboard, or doesn't know how to send an email through Gmail, or use Google Docs, or use Canva, share documents with other people, those are skills that come from working in technology that you're going to have to use no matter what kind of a career that you go into. Everybody does email now. Everybody has to have a mobile phone. If you go to the Chick-fil-A drive-thru, the people at the Chick-fil-A drive-thru are using tablets with Bluetooth connected handheld credit card readers, and some of them have a Bluetooth connected printer. So here, just to take your order at the drive-thru, they have to have some degree of comfort with technology, and probably some basic troubleshooting skills, because the person who has to run inside and find the manager every time these two disconnect from one another, probably not going to be employed for very long. So I think that that's a big part of it. I think the bigger part of STEM education, though, is that you learn what we call 21st century skills. All right. Problem solving, logical reasoning. And then this is important, how to deal with undesirable or unexpected outcomes. And, if you put one word on that, it would be failure. But failure has such negative connotation to go with it. In STEM, failure is not a bad thing. Failure just means it didn't do what you thought it was going to do. It didn't work the way you wanted to. And that's a good outcome, because you've learned something, and now you can take what you've learned, feed it back into what you're trying to do, and figure out how to make it work, how to overcome those undesirable or unexpected outcomes. And these are things that we do in technical and non-technical contexts through life. So it doesn't matter whether we're an engineer or we're an accountant. Those things are going to require the same problem solving, logical reasoning, and dealing with unexpected outcome, type skills. Did you know, Leslie, that programming can make you a better writer?
No.
So in programming, we have to deal with things like word choice. All right. And in real language, there are lots of words that we can use to convey a particular sentiment, right? We have synonyms for things. But in computing, there's usually only one word that'll do exactly what you want it to do. Spelling, capitalization, using the correct punctuation, all of those things matter in programming. And in email and in text, we develop lots of bad habits.
Right.
Someone once told me that English is the easiest language to speak badly and still be understood. We can break every grammar rule there is and still have somebody understand what we're trying to tell them.
Wow.
But the computer, when you're trying to do programming, that'll be the strictest English teacher you could ever have. And it's my belief that if you become attuned to those things while you're programming, you'll be more conscious of them when you're doing regular writing as well. You'll think about why that's a period or a comma or a colon instead of a semicolon, you know.
Once again,
you'll begin to pay attention to spelling and capitalization.
My mind again, Robert. That was such a good point. I mean, as you were even explaining that, I was like, well, that makes so much sense, because the computer thinks, you know, only within the lines. It's not thinking outside of the lines. And so that application is brilliant, and I've never heard anybody else make it.
So one more point about why I think that even people not interested in STEM careers would benefit from STEM. So there's a lot of evidence that suggests not only do STEM workers make more money than non-STEM workers, they also make more money even if they're working in the same non-technical career. So you got two people, they're both doing the same job. One of them has a STEM degree and one of them doesn't. The STEM degree worker is going to make more money than the one without the STEM degree. Because they are better thinkers. They're better able. They're more productive employees. They're more valuable employees.
That is fascinating. So many layers to why we should make sure that our kids are well grounded in these areas. Just that we would never ever think of. You have already given us a number, just as you've been talking, of ways that STEM is actually seen and incorporated into our everyday lives. Before we run out of time, though, I wanted to see if there's any other, you've made this so practical, so really tangible for all of us. What else is there that just kind of as we're leaving from here, we will start to pick up on how impactful these things are in our everyday life?
Sure. And so we've used this example already. Let me just expand on it a little bit. You talked about how homeschool families who educate their children tend to be more holistic about the education than people who don't homeschool. So you go to the store, you get $17.76 back in change from some purchase. Now we have a discussion about the American Revolution because there's an immediate connection, right? Of course, right, because you're a homeschool mom, and that's exactly what you would do. What happened in 1776, kids? And you could go off in so many directions from that. What else was going on in the world? You know, why did the revolution take place? And so on and so forth. How did it get to the Constitution? What happened before the Constitution? Anyway, you can do the same thing with engineering and technology, and you can do that even if you yourself are not a programmer or an engineer. We talked about that self-checkout station at the grocery store. Just teaching your kids to wonder, how does that work? You know, and the self-checkouts, some of them, they try to prevent theft by trying to detect when you put something in the bagging area that you haven't scanned yet, right? Do you know how they would do that?
I assume that every product has a weight.
Yeah. So there's a weight. And so it knows when you scan that UPC code on the back that uniquely identifies that product, it looks up the product in a database, and it's either got some dimensions or a weight or something. And so now it knows that you've checked out something that should weigh 1.5 pounds. And it goes in the bagging area. And if the bagging area doesn't increase its weight by 1.5 pounds, then there's probably something that hasn't been scanned. All right. So yeah, that's one way that we can incorporate this sort of general curiosity and inquisitiveness coupled with an analysis of how might that system do that. And then you start thinking about, how would you trick it? How could you make it think you checked something out that you didn't? What are some other ways it might not work correctly? What happens because, you know, it can make a mistake and you put something in the bagging area and you legitimately checked it out and it says that you didn't. You know, how could you prevent that? And so I think just having those conversations in the context of your everyday outings is going to encourage the kind of thought processes that lend to, you know, the sorts of STEM education and products and projects that we've been talking about.
That I just sit here and like my mind is racing. I struggle to even ask follow-up questions because I've got so many things in my head as you're talking because we naturally make connections. We see leaves on trees, we see all of these things, and we're making connections. But I don't know that I ever dissected the way that a checkout worked. I don't
Yeah.
know that I ever tried to make those connections ever. And yet my kids were with me 1,000 times as we
Yeah.
experienced that. So this is really a black hole for so many of us that we're just not taking advantage of.
Yeah, and so we really tried to the projects that are in our product, our subscription product, we try to take those real world contexts and use them to create something that is maybe a little simpler,
Hmm.
but which can be recreated in some way. So one of the other projects that we have, you've got a car that has a backup sensor in it, probably tells you when you're
Yep.
about to hit something. And some of the more sophisticated ones have sensors on all sides and even lane departure warnings in the mirrors that tell you whether you're going outside of your lane. And so, believe it or not, the basic technology used in that is a part that's like less than $4.
Really?
Um, and so in a really, inexpensive electronics kit, you can create a little model that really shows how
Wow.
that technology works in your car.
Wow.
So we kind of try to peel the onion. We try to take out the outer layers and show you underneath how do those things work. Both so that you are more knowledgeable when you go around and you have your everyday activities, but also so that you build that sort of inquisitiveness and
Hmm.
have some knowledge to take that and take it further. How could you expand on this? How could you improve on this?
Yeah.
Because I think, again, coming back to what we started with, if the world becomes a world of technology consumers and no technology producers, then the future is going to be boring
Yeah.
because there won't be any new innovative products.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell us, you alluded a second ago to your subscription service. Tell us about that, what ages it's for, how it works. Because I suspect there are many that are really hungry for it at this point.
So sure. So our products, it's called the Excalibur Solutions STEM Academy, and it is an online subscription product. We have self-paced video lessons that are broken up into individual projects. So that obstacle detection system for your car is a project.
Hmm.
We have computer programming projects. We have electronics projects. We have some 3D modeling projects and a few others that explore other parts of technology and engineering. So that's really our focus, the T and the E in STEM. The age ranges, it's from around third grade through high school. And it's divided internally into two parts. So we have what's called Content Library Junior, and that's for our elementary students, third through around sixth grade. And in those projects, there might be 10 lessons in a project. A lesson might last 5 to 8 minutes. And we're going to assume that the user has a little bit of sort of basic arithmetic. When they get into the middle and the high school projects, the projects get to be more complex. And they might be 25 lessons long. They might take anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes per lesson. We've got one lesson that the total video runtime is almost 7 hours to complete the whole project. But the kids can go in whatever order they want. They can jump around inside. They can do a little bit of electronics and a little bit of programming and so on. Almost everything that we uses freely available online applications and,
Cool.
and accounts. So there's one called Scratch, there's one called Tinkercad, there's one called Replit. These are things that we use to do our teaching, but they don't cost anything themselves. We do have some that do use the physical electronics kits, and in those cases, we'll tell you what to go to Amazon and purchase, and they're very inexpensive, and we try to use them over and over and over again, so you get a lot of use out of the different products. But we think it's a fun way to introduce your kids to these kinds of content areas, and to develop sort of that general inquisitiveness and a desire to want to pursue this further.
Yeah, that's amazing. Where can they find it? I'm going to be sure that we link everything in the
Sure.
show notes, but it's always good to hear too. So where can they find it?
So our main website is stem.excalibur-solutions.com. And when you go there, there's 3 little main tiles and there's one specifically for homeschool families. So you click on that, it'll tell you all about our content library. We do offer a free trial, so you can get set up for a month for free and sort of explore it, check it out, see how it works, see whether it's right for your kids.
That's fantastic. And I am very excited because I get to see you again in Pigeon Forge and Branson. I'm thrilled that you're going to be there because I think that a lot of our families, especially after hearing this conversation, are going to be really eager to talk to you. But what are you talking about there when you speak? And then what can they expect at your booth and when they come by to see you?
Sure. So I'm going to be speaking at both conferences. The session title is Why STEM is Important and How to Give It to Your Kids. And it is an expansion of what we've been talking about here, more about what STEM is and a little bit of background and how it's going to benefit your kids. And we go a lot deeper into the practical applications of math and even language arts, like I've talked a little bit about. So you'll want to come and hear that because you'll get a lot more than we've had time to talk about here today. At our booth, you'll learn about our subscriptions, but you'll also bring your kids because we have lots of little hands-on activities. We'll have several computers up and different projects from our online subscription that the kids can play. They can not only play video games, but then they can turn around and see how those video games were built, because that's what we teach them how to do inside of our subscriptions. And then at both Branson and Pigeon Forge, we're also offering a class through Teach Them Diligently to do computer programming. There's a Scratch-based class and a Python-based class. And so if you're interested in those, you can register at the Teach Them Diligently conference website.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you guys, every time I walk past his booth on the exhibit hall floor, he is mobbed with kids who are in there really, really enjoying the resources and activities that he has to offer, which tells me even more how impactful it would be for them to go through these classes to actually learn this because they're so interested in it. So come to Teach Them Diligently and make sure that you check him out. You're going to want to go hear his session and then go hang out at his booth, talk to him. You guys are going to love him. Robert, thank you so much for joining me today. It's just been good to talk to you. I learn so much every time.
Thanks, Leslie. I've enjoyed it. And you can tell I'm very passionate about this. I get excited when I talk, and it's just always fun to have these kinds of conversations with people. So definitely come by the booth and say hello, and we can have our own conversation.
Exactly. You can geek out just like I do when you come and see him. Well, thank you again for joining us. And everybody else, thank you all for taking your time to be with us today. I suspect that your mind has been blown just like mine has. And so I encourage you to check out Excalibur Solutions, the STEM classes that they offer there. The URL, the link is in the show notes. So be sure that you check that out. And then come to Pigeon Forge, come to Branson, check out on site, talk to Robert, let your kids go through his classes there. They will love them. All of the information is on our website. We would love to see you there. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.